Workers demolished an old shed, but what they found underground shocked everyone. Most people were still tucked in their beds, wrapped in blankets, enjoying the calm of an ordinary morning. Birds chirped lazily from the branches, and the occasional sound of a car engine in the distance punctuated the gentle hum of daily life. In this peaceful town, change came slowly, and the residents were used to routines that hardly ever wavered. But today, the stillness of the town was about to be broken, and not in the way anyone expected. On the edge of town, on a stretch of land that had long been ignored, sat an old shed. Its paint had faded to a dull gray, the wood beneath rotted in places, and the roof sagged dangerously. The shed had been standing for as long as anyone could remember, though no one seemed to know who had built it or why. Children dared each other to peek inside when they passed by, but even the bravest rarely ventured too close. Locals whispered stories, half serious and half imagined, about what might be hidden inside. Some claimed it had once belonged to a wealthy family who disappeared mysteriously, while others said it was nothing more than a forgotten tool shed, left to decay. Over the years, the stories became part of the town's charm, something to talk about when life felt a little too ordinary. That morning, a group of workers arrived at the property. Their job seemed straightforward enough: demolish the old shed and clear the land for a small community garden that the town council had recently approved. The team was experienced, the kind of people who had seen countless old buildings come down, and most of them expected nothing more than dust, nails, and rotten wood. They unloaded their tools, the familiar clinking of metal against metal echoing faintly in the crisp morning air. Among the workers was Tom, a man in his late 40s with hands calloused from years of labor. He had a quiet demeanor but carried a natural curiosity that often got him interested in details others overlooked. Next to him was Jason, a younger worker with a sharp sense of humor, always ready to crack a joke even in the most serious situations. Then there was Maria, meticulous and careful, who double-checked every plan before the work began, ensuring safety came first. The rest of the team had a mix of experience and energy, and together they made an efficient crew, capable of handling even the most stubborn demolition tasks. As they approached the shed, Tom couldn't help but notice how still the area felt. There was no breeze, no movement, and even the usual rustle of leaves seemed muted. It was as if the shed itself was holding its breath, waiting. Tom mentioned it to Jason, who laughed it off. "It's just an old building, man. Probably smells like dust and old wood inside." Nothing more? But Tom's eyes lingered on the shed, and a small unease began to settle in his chest, a feeling he couldn't quite explain. The team gathered around the shed and began their work. First came the removal of the debris outside, broken tools, and random piles of wood that had accumulated over the years. Maria instructed everyone to wear their gloves and helmets, ensuring no one would get hurt on the rusty nails scattered across the floor. Slowly, the shed started to give way to their efforts. The doors, once stiff and unwilling, creaked open, revealing the dark interior. A faint smell of dampness and decay escaped, mixed with the earthy scent of soil that had seeped through the foundation over time. Inside, the shed was empty, or so it seemed at first glance. Wooden shelves lined the walls, though most were warped and covered in dust. Old buckets, rusted cans, and fragments of broken tools were scattered across the floor. The sunlight barely reached the corners, creating shadows that seemed to stretch and twist like living things. Jason made a joke about it, pretending to shiver and claiming he had seen ghosts, and a few of the workers chuckled. But Tom noticed something odd. The floor didn't look entirely solid. One corner seemed slightly uneven, as if the ground beneath had shifted or settled strangely over the decades. "Hey," Tom said, pointing toward the corner. "Check this out. Doesn't that floor look weird?" Jason walked over, crouched down, and ran his hand across the dusty wood. You might be right. Feels a little hollow underneath." Maria, ever cautious, added, "We should mark it and be careful. Could be weak spots in the foundation. Nothing to panic about, though." The workers continued their routine demolition, prying off boards and removing nails. The shed had been built solidly for its time, but age and neglect had done their work. With every swing of the hammer and every creak of the crowbar, dust swirled in the air, and the sound of breaking wood echoed in the quiet morning. It was hard work, but it was satisfying, the kind of labor that made a person feel accomplished at the end of the day. As they worked, neighbors began to notice the activity. A few curious townspeople gathered at a safe distance, exchanging guesses about what might be uncovered. Some were nostalgic, remembering their own childhood visits to the shed, while others simply enjoyed the distraction from their usual routines. The scene had a festive air, despite the nature of the work, a small crowd gathering to witness the transformation of a long-forgotten space. Hours passed, and the shed slowly came apart. Boards were stacked neatly on one side, nails collected in a bucket, and the team began to notice the floorboards in the center were weaker than expected. That odd corner Tom had pointed out earlier seemed even more peculiar now. The boards sagged slightly when stepped on, and a faint, hollow sound came from beneath. "Maybe there's a crawl space," Jason suggested half-jokingly. "Or maybe a family of raccoons has been living under here for years." Tom crouched again, inspecting the floor carefully. "No, it's bigger than a crawl space and nothing alive would fit down there. There's definitely something hidden under the shed." Maria frowned. "Hidden? You mean like a basement?" Tom shook his head. "Not sure yet, but it's unusual. This shed wasn't built for storage like that. Whoever built it wouldn't have gone through the trouble." Curiosity spread through the team like wildfire. The prospect of finding something unusual energized them, making the work feel less like a chore and more like an adventure. They decided to proceed cautiously, removing the surrounding boards to examine the floor more closely. Every swing of the hammer now carried a sense of anticipation, as if they were peeling back the layers of history itself. By late morning, the floorboards had been partially removed, revealing a layer of dirt and old wooden planks beneath. Dust hung in the air, and the sunlight caught particles floating lazily, giving the room a strange, almost magical glow. The hollow sound grew louder as they tapped on different areas, and finally, Tom knelt down and brushed away some debris. Underneath, partially buried and hidden for decades, was the edge of something large and solid, an old trapdoor, almost invisible unless one knew exactly where to look. The wood was worn and darkened with age, but it was unmistakably a door set into the ground. The discovery brought a hush over the workers. They exchanged glances, each sensing that this was no ordinary find. Jason broke the silence first. "Well, I guess we found the raccoon's mansion," he joked nervously, but the laughter was brief. There was a weight to the moment, a feeling that this trapdoor had been waiting for someone to discover it for a very long time. Tom ran his fingers along the edge, feeling the grooves worn by hands long gone. Maria checked the area around it for safety, ensuring nothing would collapse if they attempted to open it. "What do you think is down there?" she asked quietly, more to herself than anyone else. Tom shook his head. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it's been here a long time." As they prepared to open the trapdoor, the excitement and tension mingled. What had seemed like a routine demolition job had turned into a real-life mystery. Every worker felt a strange mix of fear and anticipation, knowing that the moment they lifted that door, they would be stepping into a part of history that no one had seen for decades. Outside, the townspeople continued to watch, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. The ordinary shed, once overlooked and forgotten, had become the center of attention, holding secrets that would soon be revealed. The quiet morning of Willow Creek was fading, replaced by the thrill of discovery, and no one could have predicted just how shocking what lay beneath would be. The old shed, with its fading paint and sagging roof, had been just an ordinary building to most people. But for Tom, Maria, Jason, and the rest of the crew, it had become a doorway into something far greater, a mystery waiting patiently beneath the surface, ready to change their ordinary day into something they would never forget. The trapdoor beneath the old shed had been uncovered, revealing a dark, hidden space that seemed to stretch into the earth itself. Tom, Jason, and Maria stared at it in a mixture of awe and nervousness. The wooden door, worn with age, creaked faintly as it shifted slightly in the soil. Dust rose in tiny clouds around it, sparkling in the slanted rays of morning sunlight. The workers had spent hours on the demolition, expecting only dust, broken wood, and old tools. But now, facing the hidden door, it felt as though they had stumbled onto a secret that had been waiting for decades, or perhaps longer. Jason leaned over, squinting into the darkness. "Well, it's definitely bigger than I thought. Maybe someone built a basement under this shed and forgot about it?" His voice was light, trying to mask the nervous excitement bubbling inside him. But even he couldn't hide the thrill of the unknown. Maria, ever careful, knelt beside the door. She ran her fingers along the edges, feeling the grooves worn by time. Whatever it is, it's been here a long time. We need to be careful. That wood might not hold our weight, and we don't know what's down there. Tom nodded, his instincts alert. He was drawn to mysteries, to hidden corners of history that others ignored. He ran his hand over the trapdoor, noting the faint scratches and marks that suggested it had been opened before, perhaps many years ago, and then sealed again. "We need to take it slow, one person at a time," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We don't want to rush into something we can't see clearly." The workers gathered around, forming a small circle of anticipation. They had already cleared the surrounding area of debris, making space for someone to carefully open the door. Dust swirled in the air, giving the moment a kind of magical quality. Outside, the curious townspeople had noticed the activity and began to watch from a safe distance. They whispered among themselves, sharing old tales about the shed, wondering what the workers had found. With slow, deliberate movements, Tom lifted one corner of the trapdoor. It resisted at first, groaning as the wood shifted after decades of stillness. Then, with a final push, it began to rise, revealing a narrow gap that led into darkness. A faint smell of damp earth and age wafted up, making the hair on the back of their necks stand on end. Jason instinctively pulled a flashlight from his tool belt and shone it down the opening. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing a small, cramped space lined with old wooden planks. Dust covered every surface, and the faint outline of crates and boxes could be seen piled neatly against the walls. The room seemed untouched, as if someone had sealed it carefully and then walked away, never to return. There was an air of stillness, almost reverence, that made the workers pause. "Wow," Jason whispered. He had seen a lot in his years of work, but nothing quite like this. "It's like stepping back in time." Maria crouched at the edge, her hands gripping the sides of the trapdoor. "Look at the crates. They're all sealed tight. This isn't just old junk. They were preserved for a reason." Tom nodded. "Let's take it slow, one step at a time. I'll go down first, check the floor, and make sure it's safe." He carefully climbed down, feeling the rough wood under his boots. The floorboards were solid, but they creaked faintly under his weight. Jason followed, shining his flashlight to help illuminate the space. Maria descended last, keeping her movements cautious and deliberate. Once all three were inside, they took a moment to survey the room. It was larger than it appeared from above. The walls were lined with wooden crates of various sizes, covered in dust and cobwebs. Some crates were tied with old ropes, while others had metal clasps, rusted but still intact. In the corner, a small table held a stack of yellowed papers and a few objects that looked like personal belongings. The air smelled of earth and old wood, a combination that was both musty and oddly comforting, like stepping into a long-forgotten memory. Tom moved closer to one of the crates and brushed off the thick layer of dust. He ran his fingers along the rough wood, noting the faint carvings on the side, initials and dates, almost like someone had wanted to leave a mark for the future. "These crates aren't ordinary," he said quietly. "They're personal. Someone cared about what was inside." Jason bent down and examined a smaller crate. He carefully lifted the lid, revealing bundles of old papers tied with string. The handwriting was delicate and precise, written in ink that had faded to a soft brown over the years. The documents appeared to be letters, journals, and official papers. Jason's eyes widened. These are old records, maybe even family letters. Look at the dates. These go back decades." Maria picked up a small wooden box from the table. Inside were personal items, a locket, a pair of spectacles, and what looked like a diary. She turned the pages carefully, noting the handwriting and the careful entries that described daily life in the town long ago. "This isn't just history," she said softly. "This is someone's life, someone's story, and it was hidden here beneath the shed for who knows how long." As they explored further, the workers began to piece together clues about the people who had once occupied this hidden space. Old photographs, yellowed and fragile, showed a family standing proudly in front of a house long gone. There were letters addressed to neighbors, journals describing everyday activities, and even small trinkets from distant travels. It became clear that this was not a storage room for random junk. It was a carefully preserved collection, hidden and protected from the outside world. Jason couldn't help but smile at the discovery, though a sense of awe tempered his excitement. "This is incredible," he said. "It's like we've found a time capsule, Everything here tells a story, and we're the first to see it in decades." Tom nodded, his mind racing. "Exactly, and we need to document it carefully. Every crate, every paper, every object tells us something. Whoever hid this didn't want it to be found easily. There's a reason it stayed buried for so long." Maria agreed. "We should record everything. Photos, notes, measurements. We don't know how fragile some of these items are. One wrong move and we could lose a piece of history." The workers continued to explore the hidden room, uncovering more crates, boxes, and personal items. Each discovery added a new layer to the story, revealing glimpses of a life that had been forgotten by time. There were clothes neatly folded in wooden chests, small furniture pieces carefully stored, and even maps showing parts of the town as it had appeared decades ago. It was clear that the people who had created this underground space had done so with care, preserving what mattered most to them. Hours passed as they carefully examined each item. The initial excitement had transformed into a focused determination to understand the space and its contents. They photographed the crates, labeled the papers, and took careful notes on everything they found. Outside, the townspeople continued to watch from a distance, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding beneath the old shed. Rumors began to spread, whispers of hidden treasures, family secrets, and long-forgotten stories. Despite the fascination, there was also a sense of mystery and unease. Some of the letters hinted at struggles the family had faced, describing difficult times and personal hardships. Others mentioned neighbors and local events that were no longer remembered by anyone alive. It became clear that this hidden room was not just a storage space. It was a sanctuary, a place where memories were protected from the outside world. Tom, Maria, and Jason realized that their discovery was bigger than they had imagined. They were not just workers demolishing an old shed. They were witnesses to a story that had been hidden for generations. Every object, every paper, every photograph held a piece of the puzzle, waiting to be understood. The excitement of the find was tempered by respect for the people who had gone to great lengths to preserve their history. As the afternoon sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the room, the workers made a decision. They would carefully remove the crates and documents, bringing them to the surface for further study. They knew that this discovery would attract attention from historians, local authorities, and perhaps even distant relatives. But for now, their task was to ensure that nothing was damaged and that every piece of the hidden room's story was preserved. They began to lift the crates, one by one, using blankets and careful movements to prevent damage. The room, once a quiet, hidden world, now felt alive with the presence of the past. Every item they touched seemed to hum with history, a silent testimony to lives once lived and now remembered. As they worked, Tom paused to look around the room one last time. The sunlight streaming in from the trapdoor illuminated the dust particles, creating a golden haze that seemed almost magical. He realized that this moment, this discovery beneath an ordinary shed, was something that would stay with him forever. They were uncovering more than objects. They were uncovering a story, a connection to the past that would change how the town remembered its history. By the time the workers finished their initial cataloging, the hidden room was nearly empty, its treasures carefully placed above ground. They closed the trapdoor for safety, marking its location so it could be studied properly later. Outside, the townspeople gathered, curious and excited, eager to hear what had been found beneath the old shed. The ordinary morning in Willow Creek had turned into an extraordinary day. What began as a simple demolition job had become a journey into history, uncovering secrets that had been carefully hidden for decades. The shed, once overlooked and forgotten, had revealed a story that no one expected, a story of family, memory, and the lengths people go to preserve the things that matter most. And as the workers stood outside, looking at the ordinary shed that now held extraordinary secrets, they knew that this was only the beginning. The discoveries beneath the shed would lead to more questions, more exploration, and perhaps even answers to mysteries the town had long forgotten. For Tom, Maria, and Jason, the day had become a moment they would never forget, a moment when ordinary work turned into an extraordinary adventure, and the past reached out to touch the present in the most unexpected way. Once the crates and boxes had been carefully lifted from the hidden underground room, the workers gathered around them on the patch of dirt beside the shed. The sun was now higher in the sky, casting warm light over the scene. The ordinary shed that had once been nothing more than an abandoned structure now appeared like a gateway to a different time. Every crate, every document, every artifact seemed to hum with history, and the workers couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and awe. Tom knelt beside one of the larger crates, brushing away the last layer of dust. The wood was heavy and worn, with markings that suggested it had been handled carefully by someone who understood its value. Jason and Maria helped him lift the lid, revealing stacks of old papers, delicate fabrics, and small boxes tied with string. The items inside were in remarkably good condition, given how long they had been hidden. Jason reached in and lifted a bundle of letters, carefully untangling the string that held them together. The handwriting was neat and elegant, written with care. "These are letters, actual letters from decades ago," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "Look at the dates, they go back to the early 1900s. Maria took one of the letters and read it quietly. The words spoke of daily life in the town long ago. Family celebrations, visits from neighbors, challenges faced in everyday life. There were mentions of school, local festivals, and even small personal triumphs and disappointments. Each line painted a vivid picture of a time that the current residents of Willow Creek could barely imagine. Tom leaned back, taking in the full scope of the discovery. These letters, they're not just papers, they're a record of a family's life. Their joys, struggles, and experiences have been preserved down here for decades. Whoever hid this wanted it to last. They wanted someone to find it and remember them. As they examined more of the crates, the workers discovered personal belongings, small trinkets, photographs, and items of clothing. A delicate locket opened to reveal a tiny photograph of a young couple, smiling proudly at the camera. A pair of spectacles, carefully folded, sat next to a journal filled with handwriting that described everyday routines and special occasions alike. There were maps of the town, drawn meticulously, showing buildings that no longer existed and streets that had long since changed. Jason couldn't contain his curiosity. It's like we're stepping into someone's private world. Everything here is so personal, so deliberate. Whoever did this really cared about preserving it. Maria nodded. And think about it, they went to great lengths to hide all of this. Under a shed, no one would think to look. They must have known that their world could be lost if left out in the open. Tom's mind was racing. He carefully lifted a crate that looked heavier than the others. Inside were more letters, tied in bundles, along with old documents that appeared to be official records, birth certificates, property deeds, and even school records. "This isn't just a family history," he said softly. "It's part of the town's history. Some of these people, some of these events, no one remembers anymore, but they were real, and now we have proof." The workers spent hours going through the items, cataloging each piece and photographing them. They were careful not to rush, knowing that even a small mistake could damage something irreplaceable. Every crate opened brought new surprises and a deeper connection to the past. The hidden room beneath the shed had been a time capsule, preserving not only objects but memories, emotions, and stories that had long been forgotten. Outside the shed, the townspeople had begun to gather in larger numbers. News had spread quickly, and curiosity drew people from nearby streets. Some remembered the old family mentioned in the letters, their names echoing faintly in local memory. Others were simply fascinated by the discovery, eager to see history come alive in front of their eyes. The ordinary shed, once ignored and overlooked, had become a center of excitement and wonder. Tom carefully opened one of the final crates. Inside, they found a collection of diaries and journals, some bound in leather, others in simple cloth covers. The pages were yellowed with age, but the ink was surprisingly clear. Maria opened one and began to read aloud. The words described family gatherings, the birth of children, celebrations, and even small tragedies. There were entries about the town itself, events that shaped the community, local conflicts, and moments of joy that had long since faded from memory. "These diaries," Maria said softly, her voice filled with emotion, "they're more than just words. They're a connection to the people who lived here. It's like we're hearing them speak across time." Jason held a small box, carefully untangling the string that bound it. Inside were items that hinted at the family's daily life: a sewing kit, old coins, small toys, and tools. Each object told a story, revealing how people lived, worked, and cared for one another. "I can't believe how much effort went into preserving all of this," he said. They weren't just hiding things, they were protecting memories. As the day went on, the workers realized the magnitude of their discovery. This hidden room beneath the shed was more than just a storage space. It was a carefully preserved record of life in Willow Creek decades ago, a glimpse into the hopes, fears, and daily experiences of a family that had long been forgotten. The excitement they felt was tempered by a sense of responsibility. They were now the caretakers of this history, and it was up to them to ensure it was respected and preserved. Tom took a moment to step back and look at the collection spread out before them. The sunlight fell across the crates and papers, illuminating the dust particles in the air. It was a scene that felt almost sacred, a quiet reminder that history is not always found in grand monuments or official records. It is often hidden in small, ordinary places, waiting for someone to discover it. Maria and Jason continued to sort through the items, carefully organizing them for further study. They labeled each crate, noting the contents and the condition of the objects. Every discovery brought new questions. Who had hidden this room? Why had it been sealed for so long? What events in the family's life had led them to preserve their belongings in such secrecy? The more they uncovered, the more the story began to take shape. It was clear that this family had experienced both joy and hardship, and that they had gone to great lengths to protect their memories. Letters spoke of love, loss, and hope. Diaries described everyday life with a level of detail that made the past come alive. Objects from photographs to toys provided tangible connections to people who had once walked the same streets the workers now stood on. Outside, the townspeople grew more curious. Some came forward cautiously, hoping to catch a glimpse of the discovery. Older residents recognized names in the letters and diaries, connecting the dots between the hidden room and the history of Willow Creek. Stories that had long been forgotten began to resurface, and the town found itself drawn together by a shared fascination with the past. By late afternoon, the workers had cataloged nearly everything. They were exhausted but exhilarated, aware that they had uncovered something extraordinary. The shed, which had once seemed ordinary and forgotten, had revealed a story that touched the lives of everyone in Willow Creek. What began as a routine demolition job had become a journey into the past, uncovering secrets that had been hidden for decades. Tom, Jason, and Maria sat back for a moment, surveying their work. The crates were carefully stacked, the documents organized, and the items preserved for further study. They knew that historians, researchers, and perhaps even descendants of the family would soon come to examine the discovery. But for now, they simply took in the moment, appreciating the weight of what they had uncovered. "This is incredible," Jason said quietly. "We're part of something much bigger than ourselves. We're connecting the present with the past in a way few people ever get to experience." Maria nodded. "And it's a reminder, history isn't always in textbooks or museums. Sometimes it's hidden in places we least expect. All we have to do is look carefully and treat it with respect." Tom smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. "We've been given a rare opportunity to witness history firsthand and to make sure it's remembered. That's something special." As the sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the shed and the surrounding land, the workers prepared to close up for the day. They carefully placed the items in a secure area nearby, ensuring nothing would be damaged. The shed itself, now empty of its hidden treasures, stood quietly, its secret no longer entirely hidden but still holding the echoes of the past. The town of Willow Creek had witnessed an extraordinary event. What had seemed like an ordinary shed had become a portal to a forgotten world, revealing the life and memories of a family who had long since disappeared. The discovery sparked curiosity, wonder, and a sense of connection to the past that would resonate for years to come. For Tom, Maria, and Jason, the day had transformed their ordinary work into an unforgettable adventure. They had uncovered not only objects and documents but a story of people who had lived, loved, and struggled, and who had taken care to preserve their memories for future generations. The hidden room beneath the shed had become a bridge between the past and the present, a reminder that even the most ordinary places can hold extraordinary secrets. And as the workers packed up and prepared to leave, they knew that the story was far from over. The items they had discovered would be studied, preserved, and shared, allowing the family's history to be remembered and honored. What began as a simple demolition job had become a journey into time itself, revealing the depth, beauty, and complexity of human life hidden in a quiet corner of Willow Creek. The ordinary shed, once ignored and forgotten, had transformed into a symbol of history, memory, and discovery. And as the workers walked away, they carried with them the knowledge that they had touched something remarkable, a story that would continue to unfold, connecting the past with the present in ways they could only begin to imagine. By the time the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the workers finally stepped back to admire the fruits of their day's labor. The shed, which had once been an ordinary, neglected structure, now stood as a silent witness to one of the most remarkable discoveries in the town of Willow Creek. The crates, boxes, letters, photographs, and personal belongings had been carefully organized and temporarily moved to a safer location, awaiting the attention of historians and local authorities. For Tom, Maria, and Jason, the events of the day had transformed what began as a routine demolition into a moment that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. The news of the discovery had already begun to spread throughout the town. Word traveled quickly, moving from neighbor to neighbor, crossing streets, and reaching the ears of people who had never even noticed the old shed before. By the late afternoon, a small crowd of residents had gathered near the property, their curiosity barely contained. Children peered from behind their parents, wide-eyed and whispering, while older townspeople exchanged stories and memories of the family whose letters and photographs had been found. Some recalled faint tales passed down by their own parents, while others admitted they had never known the full story. The shed had always been a point of intrigue, but no one had imagined it could hold something so extraordinary. The town council was contacted immediately, and soon after, a group of local historians arrived to examine the items. These experts were skilled in handling fragile historical documents, and they approached the crates and papers with careful reverence. They set up tables, gloves, magnifying glasses, and notebooks, creating a temporary workspace to catalog, study, and preserve the discovery. For the townspeople, the scene was mesmerizing, a glimpse into a world long gone, brought to life by the objects that had survived decades of being hidden underground. Tom, Maria, and Jason were invited to assist the historians, sharing their first-hand experience of finding and handling the items. The trio felt a deep sense of pride and responsibility. They had uncovered a story that belonged not only to the family who had preserved it, but also to the entire town of Willow Creek. Every detail, from the carefully tied bundles of letters to the small toys and personal belongings, offered a window into a life that had once existed but was nearly forgotten. As the historians began to study the documents, they started to piece together the story of the family. The letters revealed that the family had been influential in the early development of Willow Creek, participating in community events, local businesses, and town decisions. Their diaries described both the joys and challenges of life, providing insight into daily routines, celebrations, hardships, and personal milestones. Even small details, like the names of neighbors, the weather on certain days, and the progression of local festivals, added richness to the narrative. Maria carefully handed over a small leather-bound diary to one of the historians. The expert opened it gently, revealing handwritten entries that described moments of personal triumph, loss, and love. "This is remarkable," the historian said softly, as if speaking aloud the weight of the discovery. These entries provide an intimate look at life in Willow Creek decades ago. They are invaluable records of social and cultural history, and they allow us to understand the town in ways that no textbook ever could. The photographs were equally fascinating. They depicted family members at various stages of life, children playing in the yard, parents attending community events, weddings, and other celebrations. Some photos were candid, capturing moments of genuine joy, while others were carefully posed, reflecting the customs of the time. Each image held a story, and the townspeople who recognized names or faces began to share their own recollections. It became clear that the hidden shed had preserved not only physical artifacts, but also the collective memory of a part of Willow Creek's past. Jason picked up a small box of trinkets, examining each item carefully. Among them were a set of old coins, a miniature sewing kit, a pocket watch, and tiny toys that had clearly belonged to children in the family. "It's amazing how personal these things are," he said quietly. "They're not just objects, They're pieces of life preserved for decades. And now we get to see them, to understand them, and maybe even share them with future generations. As evening approached, the excitement in the town continued to grow. Residents began to discuss how the discovery could be shared more broadly. There were suggestions to create a small museum exhibit, to include the letters, photographs, and objects in local schools, and to write an article or book documenting the family's story. The shed, once forgotten and overlooked, had become a catalyst for community engagement, connecting the present generation with the lives of those who had come before. Tom, Maria, and Jason found themselves reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. What had started as a routine demolition job had turned into a historical revelation. Each step of the day, from discovering the trapdoor to carefully uncovering the crates and documents, had been filled with suspense, curiosity, and wonder. They had witnessed history hidden in plain sight, preserved in a way that demanded respect and careful attention. The historians worked late into the evening, carefully photographing, cataloging, and documenting the items. They took notes on every detail, the condition of the paper, the handwriting styles, the types of objects, and even the small marks on the crates. It was painstaking work, but it was necessary to ensure that nothing was lost. Every photograph taken, every page documented, became part of the permanent record of the discovery. Meanwhile, the townspeople continued to gather, some sharing stories passed down by their families, others simply marveling at the thought of history hidden beneath an ordinary shed. The excitement created a sense of unity, as people of all ages connected over the shared experience. Children listened attentively as older residents recounted stories of the past, while adults considered how the discovery could enrich the town's understanding of itself. As night fell, the shed and its surroundings were secured for safety. The crates and items were moved to a protected location, and temporary lighting was set up for any further work that needed to be done the next day. Tom, Maria, and Jason finally allowed themselves a moment of rest, sitting on a nearby bench and reflecting on the extraordinary events of the day. "This has been unbelievable," Maria said softly. "We expected to demolish a shed, and instead we uncovered decades of history. I never imagined we would be part of something like this." Jason nodded, his eyes still reflecting the excitement. "It's amazing to think that all of this was hidden right beneath our feet. The family who did this had no idea how long it would stay hidden or who would eventually find it. And now we get to help preserve their story." Tom looked at the shed, now silent and empty, but still holding the echoes of the past. "It's a reminder," he said quietly, "that history is everywhere. Sometimes it's in museums, but sometimes it's right beneath us, waiting for someone curious enough to find it. And today we were that someone." Over the next few days, the town council and local historians worked together to plan the preservation of the discovery. The letters and documents were carefully stored in archival boxes, the photographs were scanned and cataloged, and the personal items were cleaned and displayed with care. The story of the family and their hidden treasures began to spread beyond Willow Creek, attracting attention from neighboring towns and even regional historians. The discovery also inspired the residents to think about the importance of preserving their own history. People began to explore old family documents, photographs, and artifacts, realizing that every town, every street, and every home held stories worth remembering. The shed had become more than a hidden storage space. It had become a symbol of memory, community, and the passage of time. Tom, Maria, and Jason were invited to share their experience with the community at a small town meeting. They recounted the events of the day, describing the moment they discovered the trapdoor, the excitement of uncovering the hidden room, and the careful process of cataloging the items. Their story was met with applause and admiration, and the townspeople expressed gratitude for the care and attention they had shown in handling the historical artifacts. "What I love most," Maria said during the meeting, "is that this discovery connects us to the people who came before us. Their lives, their struggles, their joys, they're all preserved here, and now we get to honor them by remembering their story." Jason added, "It's also a reminder that ordinary places can hold extraordinary secrets. We never know what history might be hiding, waiting for someone to discover it." Tom concluded, "This shed was just a shed for decades, but now it's a part of Willow Creek's history. And I hope it inspires all of us to look a little closer at the world around us. because sometimes the past is closer than we think. In the weeks that followed, the items from the shed were displayed in a small exhibit at the town's community center. Residents, schoolchildren, and visitors came to see the letters, photographs, and personal belongings, learning about the family whose lives had been preserved beneath the old shed. The exhibit became a point of pride for the community, sparking conversations about history, memory, and the importance of preserving the stories of those who came before. The shed itself remained, silent and weathered, a reminder of the hidden history beneath its floorboards. The discovery had changed the way people saw the town and each other. It had created a shared sense of wonder and appreciation for the lives that had shaped Willow Creek long before the present generation walked its streets. Tom, Maria, and Jason returned to their daily lives, but the memory of the day stayed with them. They often spoke about the discovery, reflecting on the thrill of uncovering the hidden room and the profound connection they felt to the family whose history they had helped preserve. It was a story they would share for years to come, one that reminded them of the unexpected magic that could be found in ordinary places. The ordinary shed, once ignored and forgotten, had revealed a story that would live on. It had shown that history is not always in grand monuments or textbooks, but often hidden in quiet corners, waiting for someone curious and careful enough to uncover it. The discovery beneath the shed had brought the past into the present, creating a bridge across generations, and ensuring that the memories of a long-forgotten family would never be lost again. Willow Creek would never be the same. A shed that had once been overlooked had become a symbol of memory, discovery, and the power of curiosity. And for Tom, Maria, Jason, and the entire community, the lesson was clear. Even the most ordinary places can hold extraordinary secrets, and history is often waiting quietly for someone to notice it.